How much does a project build cost? Let's get into this one.
RevelatorAlf.
Hello, welcome to RevelatorAlf. So this video is all about the cost, the total cost, and what you can expect to pay for a motorcycle project build. Now I'm in the middle of mine, this Rieju Marathon 125 AC SM project build. All the videos are on the channel, and I've also dedicated an information page on the website. If you go to Petrol Motorcycles, Rieju Motorcycles, and then you'll find the link there. Anyway, that aside, most people who try and do a motorcycle build or a project motorcycle build, they end up either not finishing it, they end up selling it on, or it just goes way over budget. So if you read information sources or blogs or whatever websites about project building, they'll always kind of give you the two scenarios and they'll say, right, is this bike for you as a passionate build, let's say? Is it something that you're going to treasure, or is this something that you're going to try and flip and earn some money off and increase the value? In both cases, it comes down to one starting point, and the starting point is what you buy the bike at. If you buy it at the cheapest that you possibly can, that's going to give you the best advantage, if you like, in keeping the cost down overall. But regardless of how much you buy the bike for, you might even get it for free. There's still going to be lots of costs associated with it, and the worse condition the bike is, and you could argue actually that's why it's so cheap, the more expensive it could be to put it all back together. It also really depends on what kind of project build you're doing. Are you just getting the bike to get back on the road, let's say, or is that you can go do some trail riding or racing or whatever it is? Maybe it's a track bike, whatever it is. Or are you doing it as a full restoration? And there's going to be completely different costs associated with that. Also, what you've got to consider is it a popular bike or is it a rare bike? Because if it's a rare bike, whilst the overall value of it will be really high, the reason why it's so rare is, one, there's not many of them around, but also the parts might be virtually impossible to get, or you might have to make your own parts as well. So that's why the price tag on that might be really high, but also to get the parts will be really expensive as well. However, if it's a really popular bike, then actually the purchase price might be quite low as well, but also the cost of getting all the replacement parts might be really low as well. So there's lots of different things to consider, I think. Now, I've done a few project builds over the years, and some I've had to just let go, couldn't finish, or change direction. Others I've completed, and others have kind of come within budget, and others have just been completely blown away. And I think it's always a common theme from whenever I work on a bike, in that the parts themselves cost a certain X value, let's say, but what I find always adds extra is let's say all the consumables, specific grease, oils, let's say, you need new bearings, you need new dust seals, oil seals, that kind of thing, and all these things just keep on adding on to the cost of the build. The other thing you got to consider is what tools do you have available? Now, some project builds, in fact virtually all project builds, will require some kind of speciality tool. You might be able to get away with fashioning your own tool to do the job, but most of the time that requires, like I say, a bearing puller or a clutch basket puller or something, or whatever it is. So you'll need something for motorcycle engine building in general, but you also may need a special tool for that particular motorcycle or that particular motorcycle engine, let's say. And this has kind of happened more and more so in as the years have gone on with manufacturers. Not only have they produced their own bikes, but they've also produced their own tooling to work on that bike as well, and the same can be said for cars as well. So most things can be overcome, but there's definitely a cost implication of having to buy tools. Now, if you're only ever doing a single build, then obviously you've got to add in all the costs, all these extra costs. So let's just say, for example, you need some grease, okay, some lubricating grease, some bearing grease, whatever. So you get a big tub of grease. Ignore the brand, ignore what this is. It's just a big tub of grease, okay? Or even a smaller one. Well, you might only use a fraction of this, but you've still had to pay for the whole amount. Now, if you're doing subsequent builds, then obviously this, effectively, you'll be using for free. But if you're only ever using it once, then it's just that one purchase that you're going to make. Now, it's the same if you have to buy a tool for that particular build and you'll never use it again. It's kind of added to the overall cost. So sometimes when I hear about project builds and they say, okay, it only costs me, you know, $100 or whatever, or £100 to, you know, put this bike back on the road. Well, one, they could be incredibly fortunate that they didn't find any other issues with the bike. They're very quick fixes, but also they probably didn't need specific tooling, or they already had the tools in their workshop, or they already had the consumables with them as well. Let's say greases and oils and filters, whatever, but also specific like hand tools, or, you know, things like sandpaper, you know, just to get a finish right, or anything like that. If you've got a fully operational workshop, then these project builds are going to be a lot easier. If you're just doing these at home, then they will be a lot more expensive, I would say. And I think probably this is where most project builds fail, is that the cost just gets too much and people just lose interest, and they're either sitting in a garage for 10 years, never being touched, or they just sell them on because they just can't be doing it, or the task just becomes too great for somebody, whatever it is. Now, I'm not any expert, and I always say this with any work that I ever do, let's say, or anything that I've ever shown on my channel, is that whatever I learn or whatever I come across, you know, I try and share that information across. So let's say the last bike that I bought before this one was a Harley Davidson. Well, I'd never owned a Harley, I'd never worked on a Harley before. So actually I was doing a lot of reading, and I was just sharing all that information, let's say, as I was performing the work myself, or coming across that information. The same with this new build here, this project build. I've never owned one of these bikes. Yes, you kind of develop a whole body of knowledge, and you apply knowledge from, or technique, let's say, from past experiences, or one build onto a next build, or one motorcycle maintenance task onto the next motorcycle maintenance task. They're all essentially different. They all have different numbers, different torque figures. So you're going to need maintenance manuals, or some kind of workshop manual, or literature at least. So this is one of the problems that I'm having with this bike now, is trying to source the workshop manuals for this particular bike, and also for the engine as well, and for the chassis, and for the electrics. Now, most of it is quite rudimentary, you know, you can kind of figure it out. But when it comes to specific numbers, let's say torque numbers, then sometimes you just have to do the best you can. So you add pressure to the turn, but you try not to go too far. You had thread locker where appropriate, and you know, you just do whatever you can. But sometimes it requires specific numbers, so that's where you have to do extra research, and that's what can hold up a build as well. Also, any kind of length in a build can add to the cost, because let's say if you're trying to source parts and they're not arriving for whatever reason, then that could delay you in doing other things as well. So there could be a cost associated with that, especially if you've had to book the bike in for certain things, or let's say you've been delayed in taking your bike to have it sprayed, for example, and because of that there's a knock-on effect. So the next time you have to take it to the guy, he's not available, then you have to take it to somebody else who's even more expensive. You know, it's that kind of thing. Also, if you're having trouble in getting parts, then you might have to get them from long distance or from abroad, and this is what I'm finding right now with this build. And basically there might be extra delivery charges associated with that, so everything adds up. I've very rarely known a bike where it's a full restoration or a full project build that doesn't have hidden costs. They always do, and it always slaps you in the face, and you soon start adding all these costs, and it starts to become overwhelming, especially when you start adding tooling and things like that. So for me, whenever I look at a project build, and if you watch my videos from the past as well, I always talk about the initial purchase price. Try and get it for as cheap as possible. Do your research on the parts availability and how much they're likely to cost. And also, when you go and look at the bike, try and work out what's needed on that bike, because you can virtually double what you think it's gonna cost you as well. And I say, it really depends to what extent you want to take this rebuild or this project to. Do you want to make it a full restoration, or you just want to make it a road going or a working vehicle, let's say? Now, some people, like me, for example, but many on YouTube, for example, they'll do a project build and they'll try and offset that by income generation. So sometimes they'll spend even more, and you as a viewer might think, oh yeah, he's spending all this money, it's great and it's so easy to do. The problem is it isn't easy to do. They're doing it because they're offsetting it about future income generation off that, or they're going to give away the bike, but they're auctioning off raffle tickets, let's say, or you have to pay for a membership to be entered into the prize draw to win this bike at the end of it. So they're earning money at the back end. Now, there's nothing wrong with that business model. I've got no problem with it whatsoever. But what I'm saying is that it gives a kind of false sense of the actual cost of these builds and how much out of pocket some of these content creators are, these YouTubers are, where they're not really out of pocket at all. They're using the project as a way to earn money. And so I say there's nothing wrong with that, but for you guys as a viewer, and if you want to do your own project build, you won't have that. You won't have that ability to earn money off it. So, you won't be able to offset it. So everything, tooling, consumables, if you have to buy it once, that's going to add it to your first project build. If you plan to do repeated project builds, then obviously you can just use these items again and again and again. If you're going to do the same bike over and over again, that's probably the best bike project building that you can do, because you're always going to have the tooling for that bike or for that series of bikes, and you just keep on building the same one. But who wants to work on the same bike all the time, unless you're an absolute fan of that particular bike? So there's horses for courses, really. And I always say with any of these project builds, it's always a learning experience. No matter how much experience you got, how much knowledge you got, how much past experience working on other bikes, because that's what I tend to bring with all my mechanical engineering. Well, I wouldn't even say expertise, because it's certainly not expertise, but I bring that learning to whatever I want to do now and apply it. Sometimes it works, a lot of time it doesn't, and most of the time I'm just desperately searching for information online via books or manuals or online manuals, or going directly to the manufacturers to see if they can send me old manuals, that kind of thing. And might be a cost associated with that as well. So having the information, that physical information, is a really great way to start before you actually start ordering parts. Sometimes you may not know what the problem is with your bike until you actually open it up. Let's say an engine, for example. You think that might be a problem, so you have to open up the engine. Then you'll say, right, okay, I need that part, so on and so forth. Then you try and look for the parts online, and they could be really expensive. Or they could be a long delay in getting them. So that could really throw your build out of the sync. So if I had to give any advice, is first of all, again, buy it for the bike as cheap as possible. Buy a really popular bike, so that hopefully you'll be able to get lots of spares really easily. Do eBay searches for second-hand parts as well, and that kind of thing. Now, if you're like me, you want to do something different, then obviously go the other way as well. I'm not sure there's a right or wrong answer here, but anyway, I've waffled on a lot, but I thought, I'd just kind of share that with you, of certainly what I'm finding now. The costs are spiraling to a certain degree, still within check, but always keep a spreadsheet of what you're spending, and that means everything, all the consumables, all the tools that you have to buy for that project build, because in the end, that is actually how much it's costing you. It's not the price of the parts, it's the price of everything that you've spent to get that project done. And for me, that is the true cost, and not just a false cost. And also beware of kind of false representations or misleading representations of, let's say, online bike builds, where you won't have that same experience. You know, you're going to be struggling with parts, struggling with finances, let's say. And that could be part of the challenge, really, to try and get these things as cheap as possible or try and come in on budget. Now, for some of you, money might be no object or whatever it is. You know, you think, right, I don't have a time frame. If I have to spend 20 years, 25 years building this bike up, sourcing parts or getting somebody to make the parts, then so be it. That's absolutely fine. Again, those are specific bike builds that most people won't do. Most people just want to get the bike up and running as soon as they can and get it to a certain standard, whatever it is. But anyway, I hope you found that useful. So, you know, all the information that I'm learning, let's say, on this bike build, I'm going to put it on the website, on the Rieju Marathon AC SM 125 build. All the videos will be on a playlist on the YouTube channel as well, so you can view those. And also, I'm making a few videos here and there of any tips or any bits of equipment that I haven't used in a while and I've had to suddenly use it on the bike build. I think, oh, this might be interesting for other people to find out about as well. So there's lots of that stuff coming as well on the channel. None of it is groundbreaking. I'm not pretending to be some kind of guru of motorcycle building, far from it. You know, I'm just like anybody else really, but I just like working on bikes and hopefully sharing a little bit of what I find or what I use, all the problems that I come across. That's essentially what I like doing, is anything that I come across that is a little bit different. Hopefully I can share that with you guys as well. Anyway, hope you found that useful. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that bell, like and share. Check out the website RevelatorAlf.com. Ta-da!